All right, welcome everybody to the launch of our prosecutorial accountability campaign entitled The Power of Prosecutors. I'm Sarah Khan, I'm a campaign communication strategist here at the ACLU of Michigan, and we'll hear from Jessica Ayub, our public engagement strategist, who will talk more about the campaign.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. The ACLU of Michigan's Campaign for Smart Justice has the goal of cutting incarceration in Michigan by 50% and eliminating racism in the criminal legal system. To help us meet our goal, we are launching the Power of Prosecutors, which is a campaign committed to educating Michigan voters across the state about the power prosecutors have to shape the criminal legal system in their community and to show voters where their prosecutor stands on key issues like police accountability, racial justice, and transparency. And across the state, people are protesting to demand police accountability and an end to systemic racism that permeates every facet of our nation, including our criminal legal system. Mass incarceration separates families, wastes taxpayer dollars, and disproportionately impacts communities of color, all while failing to improve public safety. In Michigan, the prison population has skyrocketed, growing by 172% between 1980 and 2016. In 2017, Michigan had the 7th highest rate of correctional control in the US. Michigan's Black and Brown communities suffer the most from our incarceration crisis. And of the 64,000 people who are incarcerated in Michigan jails and prisons, nearly 54% are Black, despite making up only 14% of the state's population. Black residents are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white people in Michigan. No single person has as much power in our communities to bring true justice to our criminal legal system than the county prosecutor. Michigan needs prosecutors who are committed to combating racism, holding police accountable, clearing marijuana convictions for now legal amounts, and investing in alternatives to incarceration. As the elected chief law enforcement officer, prosecutors must strive to reflect the views and priorities of their constituents who are increasingly supporting measures to end mass incarceration and demand transparency in decision making. We asked all candidates across Michigan to answer a survey to find out where they stand on key reforms and practices critical to overhauling the criminal legal system. And our goal is to make this information accessible to voters, which is why we've launched our website, www.smartjusticemi.org. This website will be a hub for voters to find out who their prosecutor candidates are, where they stand on key issues. Ahead of the 2020 election, we'll continue to educate and hold candidates accountable to their constituents. And now we'll hear from Elberton, relational organizer for Michigan Liberation.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate being here to explain our campaign. I am Elberton from Michigan Liberation, and our campaign, we're a nonprofit organization, criminal justice reform, dedicated to ending mass incarceration. And I, being a returning citizen, having spent 28 years and 2 months in the Department of Corrections, I'm well aware of the effect that it has on our community. Mass incarceration is devastating to our community. It destroys families. Fathers are missing from raising their children and whatnot. And we also want to make sure that we bring the awareness to the people of who the prosecutor is, because a lot of people are unaware of who their prosecutor is, what their prosecutor does, or that they're even elected officials. So we want to educate people on who the prosecutor is and what they do. And also we want to highlight the fact that they should be held accountable. There are a few cases in the national news, like Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, where the prosecutor chose not to bring charges against the people that murdered him. And as everyone knows, the George Floyd case, where he couldn't breathe. Well, we don't have to go across, the country. There's stuff like that happening right here in our own backyard. there is a case that fits both of those that we've highlighted. That's the case of Mackenzie Cochran 4 years ago. He uttered those exact same words, "I can't breathe," while being held down by 4 security guards in the Northland Mall. The current prosecutor at that time took the decision not to charge the people, saying that she did not find criminality and that she only prosecuted cases that she felt she could win. Well, I found that to be rather shocking because it showed that they seemed not to be interested in justice for the community as much as they were in their winning percentage or whatnot. So people started protesting, and we led a protest. We went outside the prosecutor's office, and we were joined by a lot of members from the community, and we demanded that she look into this case. And I'm happy to say that the next day she referred that case to the Attorney General, and now they're taking a fresh look at it. So we want to make the people aware of who the prosecutor is and what it is that they do. We also have a voter outreach program called Outvote, which we're registering and notifying and educating people about when to vote. A lot of people don't understand that there's a primary coming up in August. We feel like it's our job to let them know who the candidates are and why it will be important to find out what their values are so that their values can align with the people in the community. The voters are tired of not having accountability. That's the reason you see all of the protests that's happening now. You know, they want to eliminate this system. They want to spend less money on prisons. They want more transparency. They want more money spent on, you know, community programs and school programs, education or whatnot. So we want to make people aware that the prosecutor is the most powerful actor in the criminal justice system, and they should be held accountable for their actions. It has such an impact on our community because it's disproportionate, as you stated, Jessica, on the communities of color. Like having spent the time in the Department of Corrections, I thought the statistics were greater than that because I've seen so many people from my immediate community that were in there. There was a joke that we made. It was not really funny, but it was funny at the time. Someone had said, you know, they don't have any hour-long Black TV shows. And I mentioned, well, what about Cops? And everybody laughed because, you know, and that shows that people of color were being prosecuted at a disproportionate rate. And we want some accountability to that. We also want to know how they choose which cases to prosecute and why they are so harsh on some and not as harsh on others. I don't want to necessarily name and shame particular cases, but there were juveniles that were sentenced and they were 14, 15 years old, killed a homeless man, which I don't condone. There should be some punishment. But there were also a group of white teenagers that killed the working father by throwing brick off an overpass, and the prosecutor in that case was fighting for them to get probation. I think that he should be held accountable, and people should know that, you know, they have a voice in that. We elect them. They are our servants, public servants. They're our elected officials. So we're going to do everything that we can to make people aware of our prosecutorial accountability campaign, what you can do to get involved and raise and elect prosecutors that share the values that we share. Yeah, the majority of voters that I've come across in my community have no idea who the prosecutor is. And they, you know, but it's our job to educate them of who it is and what it is that they can do to demand full transparency. And on that note, I'm going to introduce my coworker, Mr. Booker T. Walker, who's going to speak about our prosecutor forum, candidate forum that we're having later this evening. Booker.
Yes, my name is Booker T. Walker, and I'm a member of City Covenant Church. I'm also a member of Michigan Liberation. I'm an evangelist. I'm a community activist, and I also run a prison ministry at City Covenant Church in Detroit. And I'm here to talk about the forum that we are teaming up with the ACLU, us in Michigan Liberation, and the ACLU for prosecutorial accountability. First of all, we demand the end of mass incarceration. The prosecutor, as Earl mentioned, has the most power in the criminal justice system. We would like to see more accountability and community involvement with our prosecutors, being that we elect them and they are our servants. They serve the public and they serve the people who vote for them. And so we should have a voice in what's going on. Earl mentioned a couple of the cases earlier. I personally never imagined that when I was a target of the criminal justice system that I'd be a part of such a forum. And we at Michigan Liberation believe that those closest to the problem is also closest to the solution. Sometimes you have to go to the lowest depths to reach the highest heights. And in saying that, I'm going to share a little bit about my experiences. Growing up in the 60s and seeing the civil rights struggle and being affected by it personally, mentally, and physically, through the racial injustice that was going on, seeing the riots, you talk about the assassinations of the Kennedys, you talk about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I remember that the riots going down Livernois and the fires burning and everything. And then I remember also the next year that the same people that was hating each other was partying because the doggone baseball series was won by the Detroit Tigers. And so it just seems like people don't have their minds on what's really important in life, and that's loving one another. The movement right now just shows us a clear picture of just how important it is for the prosecutorial accountability and how we need to get more involved with our prosecutors, and that's the reason why we're having this forum tonight, so that we can expand on that and that we can build a relationship and that together we can rise out of this darkness. We also need to stop the status quo of the prosecutor's office of the tough on crime stance and commit to other alternatives and diversion programs. And so that being said, I'm just honored to be here, and I was able to overcome the justice system. But I will point out one thing, that through the cycle that I went through, 1985, I received 25 to 100 for taking a purse out of an old white lady's car in Rosedale Park in Detroit, though. That was really my introduction into the prison system here in Michigan. I got out and went back. After 17 felonies, 4 failed paroles, I was in front of, in 2009, in an Oakland County courtroom with Judge Nancy Grant, a career criminal on paper. I was a broken man on drugs. The prosecutors wanted to lock me up forever. I had went in when I was 26 on the original charges. Stayed half my 20s, all my 30s, most of my 40s, and some of my 50s. And Nancy Grant, after I told her my story, she used some judicial discretion. She went against what the prosecutors were trying to give me to have, the sentence, which is not the norm. We need more judges like that who have more discretion. You would think that they would have more discretion than the prosecutors. That's why it's so important that we're having this campaign tonight. And so she sentenced me to less than 2 years. I came home in 2011, and I went to school, I graduated, I got involved in the church, and now I'm involved with the campaigns of getting prosecutors the notice to just examine their offices and the status quo that they have been facilitating in the old Jim Crow system. So that's why we're having this prosecutorial accountability tonight, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. As a reminder, the ACLU of Michigan is a nonpartisan organization and does not support or endorse candidates. If folks have questions, they can contact the ACLU of Michigan. My email is skhan, KHAN, @aclumich.org. And we hope that we'll see folks at the candidate forum tonight.